This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Josh Wenning. I'm Executive Director for the Region 8 Education Service Center. This is our video that we're putting together to help educators across Region 8 and frankly anywhere else who's out there right now in the midst of this coronavirus situation. A lot of educators working from home and remotely and having to adapt to a new normal, if you will. And so we're excited today to be able to welcome Holly Wenning, who's going to be leading us through a brief webinar entitled Extended eLearning Instructional Design. Holly is an instructional coach for Southwest Allen County Schools, focusing primarily on grades 6 through 12. And as you probably can note, she's also my wife. So I'm very excited to have her here, though. She's an expert in this content subject area. I have heard her work with teachers and many times, and especially right now when teachers are trying to adjust to this new situation, so important to think through and plan their instruction. So with that being said, Holly, who is the intended audience today for what we're going to be discussing?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Josh. Our intended audience today are teachers in grades 6 through 12 across content areas and teacher leaders, instructional coaches. The work that we are going to be doing today is going to help with extended e-learning instructional design. And my hope is that you can either use this video or use the PowerPoint that's attached to this training to facilitate this work in your own schools with your own teachers and really have a strong and design as we move forward.
Awesome. Well, it's so important, again, as teachers are trying to plan for the remainder of their school year, and really obviously something they are always constantly doing anyway. We realize teachers are constantly kind of going through this planning process, but now here we are, not used to always doing this in April, right? And so can you just kind of lead us through a little bit what you would be doing with a teacher or a group of teachers as you would be assisting them and coaching them through this process, and just kind of use, I'll kind of be I'll pretend to be a teacher in this situation. Obviously, that's not going to be content specific, but just kind of guide us through this. And then for those who are viewing, they can kind of glean this information for themselves. And at the end, we'll have some contact information for you as well. So if people have specific questions, they're certainly welcome to reach out to you. Does that sound okay for you, Holly?
That sounds great.
Great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and let you take over from here. Again, the viewers can see your presentation on the screen right now. So tell us more about extended e-learning instructional design practices.
Sure, absolutely. So there's a simple process, and we're going to work through that together right now. And we'll start with our presentation here. Here we go. So again, I'm Holly, and just so you know my heart, I am here to help teachers make small shifts in their instruction that have a really great big impact for them and for their students. And so the first step that we want to take is to really gain clarity on our goals. And we want to think about how backwards design can help. And I think it's important to know in this section, I want to really lay the groundwork for why we're doing this work. And so we're going to talk about briefly why backward design, what those 3 essential stages are, and then how long does this type of planning take? And then we'll actually get into the work of it. So first of all, why backwards design? Well, with backward design, we are tackling 2 recurring problems in design, and McTighe calls these the twin sins, aimless coverage of content and isolated activities that are merely engaging at best while disconnected from intellectual goals in learners' minds. And so we want to make sure we have a laser focus with our work so that we can really optimize our time with our students over the next 2 months. And backward design is goal directed, and we aim for specific results and design backwards from them accordingly. The desired results from stage 1 dictate the nature of the assessment evidence needed in stage 2, and then suggest the type of instruction and learning experiences planned in stage 3. So we are actually going to be going through those 3 stages today. This is a super simple design process, and stage 1 is going to be to identify desired results. Then we'll move into stage 2, which is to determine acceptable evidence. And then finally, in stage 3, we will plan the learning experiences. And with the work that we'll do in stage 1 and 2, we really will have a strong plan with our learning experiences in stage 3. And I truly believe that you cannot have the best stage 3 without completing stage 1 and stage 2. So when you're getting ready to do this with your teacher team, you are going to do a couple of things up front. I suggest that you set your clock. I've done this with groups of teachers, the teachers that you see in the picture here, and it took us 60 minutes, and that's the time I had set out from the get-go. And you want to also give yourselves permission to stay on topic. As educators, we love to talk about our content area. We may dip into talking about the struggles of e-learning. There are a lot of different areas that are rabbit trails that we can kind of go off on. And so really hold yourselves to staying on topic. Give yourselves permission to, and we joke when we say this, but we use these terms to put a pin in it, or also to park it in the parking lot. It's funny when we say it, but it also helps us to really acknowledge the idea or the issue, and then set it aside to come back to at a later time. And it keeps from, if you set this intention up front, it keeps people from having hurt feelings later on. So the first stage is to identify those desired results. And the most important part of this, or I think the most foundational part, the first thing we need to do is to really gain clarity on this new instructional time frame. And we want to be clear and realistic about how much time we have. As teachers, we have often been trained to overplan, and I think that has done a disservice to us and to our students. We really want to be realistic about our timing. We do not want to overplan. That causes stress in the end because you feel like you don't get to everything. And so really nailing down with a calendar what your school's e-learning schedule looks like for April and May, and to really count those instructional days. When I worked with the group of teachers recently that you saw on the screen, we were actually very surprised to see how few days of instructional days are actually available. And so it was very eye-opening to go through this calendar, put our school's schedule on there, and this group of teachers only had about 16 days of instruction available. So that was a real eye-opener for us. So go ahead, and there will be a link to this calendar. You can use this one that just in Google Docs that we used, and fill it in for your group. And then in stage 1, we also want to identify the essential skills and understandings. So this is done by reviewing your curriculum maps, your unit plans. What had you already had planned? And how does, thinking about those understandings, what might work what do students still need to know and do by the end of the year? So you want to identify those essential skills. And you want to also identify in your plans before what the non-essential skills are. In my work that I did with that group, we actually cut a whole section of something that they had planned because it was non-essential. It was a great assignment. It was really something that they had been excited about, but because it was non-essential, we had to let it go. And that's something that you want to make sure that you're able to do with an open mind, and know that you'll be able to do that special thing again next year, but this year it's just maybe not going to fit in. So you want to put this list that you've created a list of essential skills and understandings. You've identified them. You want to create the list and you want to put it at the top of your calendar. This is going to be really important for stages 2 and 3. You can see here the language arts teachers that I worked with had reading and writing separation. In your content area, you may have different skills that fall into different categories. You can go ahead and create that list at the top of your calendar. It makes it really easy to work with later on. So now we're at stage 3. We've talked about what we want students to know and do by the end of the school year, and now we have to determine what evidence is acceptable. How are we going to know that they have learned? How are we going to know what they know? And also, I think it's important for them to know what they know. So we want to have that acceptable evidence. So to find that, you want to review previously used assessments and rubrics. Think about what still works and ask yourself, do these assessments and rubrics work in this e-learning setting? And if not, how can I shift them to work well in this digital format? You also want to identify needed new assessment pieces. As I talked about a group of teachers I worked with, and we shifted the skills and understandings to fit into this tail end of the year, we really had to create actually another rubric that we had not had before. And we also needed to add to the assessment and take some things away from the original assessment that they had planned. So what will those assessment pieces generally look like? Think about that and discuss it with your group. And also think about how students will submit their work. That's about all I want you to do at this time. We want to create these assessments later. At the end of your meeting today, you can even divide and conquer, think about who has strengths in different areas and have people divvy up the work. And then plan to come back together and collaborate to create a really great polished, finished product for your students. And that takes us straight into stage 3. Once we have identified the skills and understandings, identified the acceptable evidence, we're ready for stage 3, which is to plan our learning experiences and instruction. And this is sometimes what teachers try to do first, but now that you've done this work, you can be really confident that whatever you plan is going to be streamlined and be directly targeted towards your goals for this end of the year. So stage 3 really then allows us to scaffold our instruction. We want to go back to the top of the calendar that we created. Think about those skills and understanding and what makes sense to teach first, second, third. Think about your learning targets, your teaching points. What makes sense? What builds on each other? Think about how one lesson builds on a former lesson and then how that next lesson prepares you for the instruction down the road. So really talk this out with your team. You know, what makes sense and what's going to make sense for your students. Think about your lessons as essential parts in a trajectory of learning. All right, so then we're ready to fill in our calendar. We want to populate that calendar. We've decided, you know, what makes sense, and we're going to fill that in. You're going to put the lesson titles in your calendar along with assessment dates. So I would go ahead and before we ask any questions, go ahead and put in your calendar the assessment date for the end of the time and then any review days, because that's going to take away from your teaching opportunities. So you're going to, once you have that all populated, you're going to ask, does the plan make sense? Don't skip this part. Does the plan make sense? And are we being realistic with our time? Again, think about our tendency to overplan and coach yourself through that. We really want to make sure we're being realistic with our time. All right, so before you leave, and you've got your great calendar, you're ready to think about creating those assessments, we also want to think about digital lesson design. I don't want to leave you without sharing some of the research-based design strategies for e-learning experiences. And we want to try to have our students do the work. We want to facilitate learning rather than just deliver the information and assign tasks to complete. How do we actually teach them as if we were with them in the classroom? And how do we create opportunities for them to do the work and for them to do the learning? So there is a plan that works great. You would start with a digital video mini lesson. This is where you connect with your students on a personal level. If you've not jumped into creating videos for your students, I would recommend it. They love to see your faces. You can welcome them. They can hear your heart. You can give them reminders. And then what you want to do is teach the information. And you want to make sure that you name that learning target. Talk about why it's important, how it builds on previous lessons, and how it's going to prepare them for the next lesson. Don't skip this part. It's really important to open up their neural pathways and get them engaged in what we're going to be doing. And then you want to provide that instruction. What is your teaching point? Go ahead and teach that to them. Think about also keeping this part down to 10 to 15 minutes. That's about all they can sit through, especially when they're home by themselves. So then you want to provide a quick model of what it is that you want students to do. And you're going to explain that criteria for success. This is a really key part in e-learning and then also in your instruction. It is one of the things that changes teachers' instruction the most, I have found, is adding in the criteria for success. What is going to be excellence in this assignment? Show them that up front. This is going to greatly improve the quality of work you receive and cut down on the feedback that you have to get. It allows students to monitor themselves as they're working. So some things you could say are, watch me model the type of thinking I'm expecting, or let's do one together first, or remember to be successful on this assignment, you will need to, and then you give that criteria. It is a game changer for students. Once you have done that video, that instruction, you want to prompt students to do work independently. And you also want to tell them how they're going to submit their assignment, how they're going to share their work with you. And this is some place where you're going to be able to give them feedback for what they've done. So, for example, we use Canvas in my district. So you could say something like, you will submit your assignment via Canvas and then share your thinking with the class in a Canvas discussion. So let them know up front what their submission is going to look like. I'd also, if you have a Canvas assignment or another way to collect that, I would also put that criteria for success in that assignment description. So it's right there for them. And you could also put the example or model there as well. Okay, and that's not the end. We want students to be able to interact with each other. We want to have some share time. So you want them to keep thinking past the assignment. You want to create a quick opportunity for them to share their thinking with the class. And that could be in a Canvas discussion, a running Google Doc, a Google form, a video form like Flipgrid works well also. So you could give them questions to answer that are they're going to have them lift something from their learning from that day. Or it could be to lift something from their assignment. And so some examples are, what were your biggest takeaways from today's lesson or assignment? Or what do you know now that you didn't know before? I've had students, take the best line from your assignment and post it in the discussion. Or connect today's learning to your own life. How does that connect to your experiences? You can have students think about the three big things they learned today and put them in order from least to most important. Or you could give them a selection, a menu to choose from. But we want to have some kind of interaction with the class where they get to share their thinking and see the thinking of their classmates. So I'm going to put these lesson planning resources, attach them to this video so that you have them. And I really want to draw your attention to the content area reading strategies. This is going to be a folder where you are going to find lots of different support for your students. And then and we also have learning target information there as well. So lots of information that if you want to dig into, you can, but you don't have to. You don't have to look at any of this. You can still go ahead and create quality lessons. So I just want to thank you for listening to this today, and know that the time that you spend up front working on this, the 60 minutes that you spend, is going to free up time during the rest of these 2 months that you can give feedback to your students, that you can interact with them on Zoom, that you can do other things, be with your family, because you have created this plan. I found that teachers who do this really have a sense of relief once it's finished and feel really confident with the instruction that they are creating for the rest of the time. Josh, is there anything else, anything I've missed or that you'd like me to add?
No, thank you so much, Holly. In fact, I'm so glad you hit on that closing piece about empowering teachers to kind of address the increasing levels of stress and anxiety that so many are feeling here. And it's already tough being a teacher, especially in April and May as we come to the end of the school year. Now we're in this situation where it's new for everyone. And just the idea of being intentional about their planning and really kind of and working backwards from what they have left for the remainder of the year to really plan each one of those days out, I would hope can reduce some of that anxiety or stress and pressure that they might be feeling out there. And this is a really powerful tool, I think, to help them be their best in these challenging times, and obviously thus impacting, having a higher impact on student learning and student performance. So that as teachers are adjusting to these new instructional strategies, they're remaining very intentional about how they address their standards and their expectations that students have for learning through the rest of the school year. So this was extremely helpful, and you did a wonderful job. Thanks for joining us today and for sharing your time and expertise. Any parting comments that you have before we sign off?
Sure. If you would I want to invite teachers to contact me if they have any questions, or even if they, if there's a time where you'd want me to hop on with a Zoom and talk to you about facilitating this work, or if you need to go deeper with this, I'd be happy to talk to you, ask you some questions to get you thinking. That's what I love to do. So my contact information is here. Feel free to use it, and look forward to meeting you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Holly, and continued best wishes to all of our educators out there and the continued great work that you are doing and have been doing and will continue to do. And hopefully this model, this approach to your instructional design will be helpful in planning the remainder of your school year and forward. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Josh.